So yeah, thanks and welcome back everyone. So next up we've got our panel discussion and I will hand over to Pauline who's going to introduce the session for us.
Yes, thanks a lot, Beth. Yes, we are organizing this panel discussion together with the Fresh Eyes workshop network, and in particular with Beth Dingley and Aditya Sengupta. And myself, so I'm Pauline Bonnet, and I'm working as a postdoc in the DLR in Munich in Veronica Irin's team on atmospheric modeling. And I'm super happy to have this workshop, this panel discussion ongoing today. It's a real honor to have our 4 speakers and our moderator today here. I will start with a few housekeeping remarks. You can ask your questions on the Padlet and with the link in the chat, or you can raise your hand. This workshop is recorded, and you will find the recording on the Fresh Eyes on CMIP workshop website afterwards. And the workshop will, the panel discussion will last for 1 hour or so, with 2 minutes introduction from the speakers, and then an open discussion with questions from Yona, together with questions from you, the audience. And we set up the questions according to the response to a survey that we sent around in our Fresh Eyes network. And we came up with 3 themes: how to engage in climate science institutions, how to have an impact as a scientist, and what are the careers outside academia for early career scientists. Let me introduce you to Yona. So Yona Silvy, she has a PhD in physical oceanography and climate at the Sorbonne University in Paris. She's now working as a postdoc at the University of Bern on climate stabilization scenarios. And she's also working now since recently in the technical support unit of the IPCC Working Group 1 as a science coordinator. And she's working part-time for the IPCC at the moment and remotely, and will join full-time in 2026. Yes, and I give the floor to you, Yona. Thanks.
Thank you, Pauline. So it's a real pleasure to be here for this panel discussion. Thanks again to the 4 panelists for agreeing to be with us. And so without further ado, I'll just ask each of you to introduce yourselves very quickly before we go on with the questions. So maybe we can start with Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Right, so I have a couple of slides to share. Let's see if it will work. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Looks perfect. Thank you.
Cool. So thank you very much for inviting me to be on this panel. It's a really nice experience. So hopefully I'll give you some interesting stories and information. I thought it might be good to just give a bit of an overview of my background to help you understand where my experiences lie, and that might help orientate your questions. So this is a sort of summary of me and my career so far. My background is in atmospheric chemistry, and while I was doing my PhD, I realized that I didn't want to stay in academia. I think I liked research, but I decided I wanted to try and be a little bit more on the sort of applied side of research and development. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I ended up going into doing a science policy internship. And so I would really recommend, if anyone is interested in learning more about other areas outside of academia, if you can find these internships. Many funding agencies or different national governments or funding agencies will have these kinds of internships. To have a look at what might be out there, because you can learn a lot from them. And so after that, I realized this internship really kind of opened some doors for me, and I ended up becoming a science policy fellow at the European Geosciences Union after I completed my PhD. And I was there for about 18 months. And so I was helping a lot with science for policy. And I think we'll discuss that a bit more in this panel session later on. And then after living in Munich for a couple of years, I moved to join the technical support unit of the AR6 Working Group 1 in the IPCC. And I started off as a science officer there and then became head of the science team after a few years. And so for those of you who are not aware, every working group of the IPCC has a technical support unit that helps facilitate the entire process of creating an IPCC report. And so I really got involved with many different activities helping with the development of the reports. This can be things like reviewing CVs to select authors, from reviewing the chapter drafts to organizing and scheduling scientific meetings to being live stream editors during on-screen editors during the approvals of the SPMs, for example. There's lots of different experiences I got from that job. And then when the AR6 closed, I then moved back to the UK and became a climate application scientist at ESA. And so very quickly, just to show you what I do now. So this graph is showing the evolution of sea surface temperature over the past few decades, and you can measure this using a lot of different ways, but one of the ways is using Earth observation or satellite data. And so I work in an initiative that looks at all of the different old and current satellite missions that will be measuring things like sea surface temperature. And this figure on the bottom is showing the blue bars are showing all the different sensors that measure sea surface temperature. And I work with researchers who basically stitch these data sets together to create this really long-term climate record. And then these long-term climate records of Earth observations on these essential climate variables, they can then be used for furthering our understanding of climate change, helping to inform and validate climate models, for example, and many different applications. And so that's more what I do now. And from there, I'll stop because I don't want to take up more time. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll come back to some of the different experiences that you have in the different parts. So maybe Izidine, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be in this panel to talk about myself and other things that you might have to ask. So basically, I am Izidine, and I'm originally from Mozambique, a country in Southern Africa. And currently, I'm a senior researcher at the Royal Dutch Meteorological Institute, and my work is on detection and attribution of extreme weather events. So basically, when there's an extreme weather event, people always want to know how did climate change influence that particular event. So my work is try to answer that question. And I work also with the world weather attribution. And I have a licenciatura degree from Eduardo Mondlane University in meteorology from Mozambique. And I also completed both my master's degrees and a PhD degree at the University of Cape Town and in 2015. Between 2015 and 2020, I worked as a postdoc at UCT. And from 2020 to 2022 as a junior research fellow. And from 2021 to 2022, I left academia and worked for the Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Center as a technical advisor. And my role there was to provide support to several projects focused on forecast-based finance, so mostly advising and translating science into action for decision-making. And during 2018 to 2022, I served as a lead author on AR6, Chapter 11 on extreme weather event. And currently, I also serve as a lead author on a special report on climate change in cities. So I'll stop here and wait for all the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Izidine. It will be great to also have your insight into the many aspects that you mentioned. So being a lead author in the IPCC, especially as maybe as an earlier career scientist, working outside of academia, and also the challenges that you faced as a scientist from the Global South. So we'll come back to all these aspects. So Helen, over to you.
I'm Helene Hewitt. I'm the CMIP co-chair now. So my background is I studied maths at university. Then I went on to do a PhD in physical oceanography at the University of Southampton. From there, my PhD was in a mixture of going to sea and modelling, and I get horrendously seasick, so I definitely became a modeller at that point. I went on to work at the Met Office at the Hadley Centre, and I started off as working on the ocean modelling, both evaluating the models against observations and developing models. Then I went on to manage the ocean modelling, the Polar Climate Group. I managed the UK Joint Marine Modelling Programme. And then I became a science fellow. So really over more than 20 odd years, I've developed my career through the Met Office and kind of been promoted in that, well, not in the same role, but in variants of that role, and worked a lot on climate, obviously. Along the way, I've had 2 children, so I've had maternity leave. I've worked part-time now for 22 years, so you know, it's a real kind of juggling act of career and family. I was super fortunate to be selected to be a coordinating lead author for the 6th assessment report on the Oceans, Cryosphere and Sea Level chapter. And partly because of my contributions there, but other things, although you never get to see what the citation is, I got this award from the UK, which is an OBE for services to climate science. And you can see on that picture there that I actually got to meet the King and be presented with the award. So that's probably the coolest thing that I've ever managed to do. Most of it's just the other things, like being on talking now, and also COP26. There's a picture there where Sarah was probably also at and sitting on the main table talking about the results from IPCC was also a pretty amazing experience. So you know, I'm super happy now to be the co-chair of CMIP and really to be able to bring the experiences from IPCC and the Modelling Centre to the whole CMIP endeavour. So that's me.
Thank you so much. I think we'll have time to come back to both your IPCC and CMIP experiences in the first part. And I didn't know about the seasick anecdote, and that was why you became a modeler. That's I guess that's a good reason. So Odin, last but not least, over to you.
Yep. So hello everyone. Thank you very much to the organizer for inviting me and doing this. So yeah, I have a background broadly in earth science, including some climate, but then after that I moved to a PhD in geomorphology that I completed in 2016, so almost 10 years ago now. And I did this PhD in Germany at the Geophysical Centrum in Potsdam. But then after some postdocs, I got a position as a CNRS researcher in Toulouse. And since 2020, I have been engaged in several networks of engaged scientists. So some, including Scientist Rebellion, that is international, but also some national groups in France. And so that's why I'm here today, I guess, because through that I've been participating to collective work. So taking position in the media about many projects that could be, or activities that are related to climate change, but also biodiversity collapse and so on. We have done, of course, interdisciplinary outreach, so trying to show systemic aspect of the ecological issues. And beyond this, just things like advocacy and outreach, we have also been joining, supporting, or organizing protests or direct actions, some legal, some illegals, that could be concerning pesticides and the link with biodiversity collapse, or the fossil fuel industry and the needs to divest, or criticizing new highway projects in France, for example, infrastructure projects that locks us into non-sustainable trajectories. And also, since these years, for all these years, I've been advocating with other colleagues for increased forms of engagement from scientists and exemplarity within academia. And in terms of research, I've been also reorienting partly my research, and so I work more on interdisciplinary methods, trying to merge geoscience and sociology or geography on issues related to the energy transition and political ecology. So I guess that's it for me for now.
Thank you, Odin. So that's perfect. I think we see how broad your backgrounds are, and it's going to be really interesting to see the diverse ways that we can engage as scientists. And I think that's one of the key questions that we as early careers have, is how we can engage both just in community science projects, but also more broadly in society, and how we can have an impact. And it's, in the end, I feel like sometimes the choice is also very personal, and we are not all meant to do all these different things. And it's going to be interesting to see how the four of you chose the different pathways that you did. So maybe in the first part, we will talk about engagement in global science institutions and science projects, with the example of the IPCC and CMIP, because that's what you have experience in for Helene and Sarah and Izidine. So maybe I'll start with Helene. Can you tell us a bit about your personal motivation to participate first in the IPCC as a coordinating lead author, and then in CMIP? And were there any particular challenges that you faced? And you mentioned, and thank you for that, you mentioned working part-time as a mother of two, and we were also wondering how that affected you and your work and your time constraints.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, what I could have said actually was before I got involved in CMIP and IPCC through the Met Office, I was part of what was the World Ocean Circulation Experiment at the time. So that was a big project to map the ocean. That was as a research scientist, and then in the early part of my career. And so already I had that feeling of contributing to something bigger than just my own work. I guess if you work at a centre like the Met Office Hadley Centre, you know, I sort of grew up in my science career with IPCC always there. You know, the TSUs were often there. John Horton, who was one of the first co-chairs, had been the Met Office or the head of the Met Office. So it's kind of in the DNA, if you like, of the Hadley Centre. So you know, I'd seen many others do that role, and so it was kind of a natural progression to want to do that. And similarly with CMIP, you know, I'd been working on models and developing models that had contributed to CMIPs and used them extensively in IPCC. So it's, again, a sort of natural progression to be involved in the community.
And so did you have institutional support to take part in these projects?
Yes. So I think that is, I mean, you definitely see that in IPCC. So, you know, if you, in our chapter, for example, we had some people who worked for CNRM in France and myself who had much more time to devote to it, for example, than people who also had teaching responsibilities. So that was definitely quite different across the chapter. And just the final thing about the challenge of working part-time, it was tricky. I mean, I couldn't have done IPCC is definitely much more than a part-time endeavour, and so you couldn't do it without the support of your family. And I probably worked many more hours than I was ever paid for in at that time. But yeah, I mean, now I make it work for myself, and I just have flexibility.
So institutional support was really key, I guess, for you to take part in these projects. And so would you say this is a big challenge for early careers? Is there space for early careers to engage? I mean, we see with Fresh Hires and CMIP that it's possible, but to what extent? And what would you say for IPCC? Did you see many early careers contributing in the 6th assessment report?
Definitely as chapter scientists. I mean, many many people contributed as chapter scientists and were supported. I think now the IPCC actually has a fund to pay for some people to contribute as chapter scientists. So I think that's one place that you can definitely contribute, but I would only recommend that if you're supported. So otherwise, I think, early careers people can definitely contribute by reviewing the report. You don't have to review the whole report. You can review a small part of the section. And in fact, and Sarah can attest to this, our chapter was actually a model for early careers people to review, and we ended up with, I think, something like 9,000 comments, which was almost unbearable, but they were very useful, and hopefully it acts as a good training for research scientists, for early careers scientists, and then you can go on and just be a contributing author on a specialist part. That's a good way to get into it, but that really depends on being in contact with the authors, perhaps. But Sarah can perhaps comment on that.
Yeah, I think, Sarah, you have a slide on how to contribute to the IPCC.
Yeah, actually, I'll share that now, and then it's and then it's out of the way. But yeah, as Helene was saying, early career researchers, it's I must admit, it's harder if you're an early career researcher to be involved as an author. Usually, the profiles of authors are mid-career or senior, but to be honest, as Helene was saying, that can be a huge commitment and a huge amount of time. So sometimes it's nicer to do smaller contributions because you can learn more and it's less time consuming. So the three main ways you can contribute. So one, as I said, is the applying as either an author or a review editor. Another way is either just contributing to the literature. So the IPCC reports are only as good as the papers that the authors are able to assess. And so if you can do a very timely review paper on a very IPCC relevant topic, then that would be very helpful and useful for the IPCC authors to review and then maybe cite in the reports. So that's one way that you can get involved. And then also, as was mentioned, you can sign up to be expert reviewers. And so there are 2 drafts of every report, a first and a second draft, and you can sign up. You just have to fill out a form, and basically no one will be rejected unless you're a media person or something like this. And you can just select one section of one chapter and add comments there. And then the other thing I would say is you can also do group reviews of the chapters. And I put in the chat a couple of links, and I'll put it in the Padlet as well, to some papers that were done after the result of a large work of early career researchers did a big systematic literature review of the working group 1. And they produced a couple of papers out of there, and they were able to demonstrate why it's very useful to have early career researchers contribute as expert reviewers. So yeah, really don't feel like you have to be the world leading expert to contribute as a reviewer. It's really open, and it's a really nice way to learn as well as be involved with the process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. So this is a very practical example of how we can contribute. And I can also say that I contributed in a group review during AR6 with the YAPSO Early Career Network, so the physical oceanography, and this worked out really well. So I would encourage people to engage with that. So continuing with the IPCC topic, maybe Izidine, you can give us some of your experience. So you were a lead author in AR6 before you had a permanent position, and you're now also a lead author in the special report on climate change in cities. So how did this work for you? How did you think of applying without having a permanent position, and what were the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, thank you. Those are very interesting questions. So when I applied for being a lead author of the IPCC, I was still a postdoc. It was my 3rd year of postdoc at the University of Cape Town. And similarly to Helen, at the University of Cape Town, we had a lot of researchers from the University of Cape Town were also participating in the IPCC in early reports, AR5, 6, 4, 5. That was the case of my supervisor, Bruce Hewitt. He was a really engaged person in the IPCC, in the World Research Program. So he was the one that was encouraging us at the research center, the Climate System Analysis Group, for us to be engaged in the international research endeavors. So it was through him that I got kind of inspired to apply, and then I contacted the national focal point, and I submitted my application, and luckily I was selected to be a lead author. I think one of the few early career researchers in the IPCC. And what played a huge role was the institutional support, because my line managers or supervisor or bosses, they understood the importance of contributing to this type of endeavors, international research, and they understood and they supported me. And yeah, basically, institutional support is really important, because if you don't have that, then it becomes really difficult.
Yeah, I think we really get that now. And how did you make it work to continue to pursue your own research at the same time as contributing as a lead author?
Yeah, I was very lucky to be at the University of Cape Town with Bruce Hewitt, and he understood, and he gave me time to focus on the IPCC and less pressure to do my own research. Of course, that comes is a trade-off, because you will spend time doing IPCC and less time doing your own research. And if you want to progress in your career, probably you need publications. And that was one of the things that I trade off between doing my own research and contributing to the IPCC. So it was really understood by my supervisor. So it really encouraged me to take part of this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And maybe so as a scientist from the Global South, can you say a few words about the particular challenges that you might have faced, or that colleagues of yours faced, and maybe that colleagues of yours, maybe that prevent colleagues of yours from participating and engaging in these projects? And we know that there are huge biases, especially in the climate sciences, between Global South and Global North. And do you have any idea of how we can better engage and how we can be more inclusive for authors in the Global South?
Yeah, I think yeah, that's a really interesting questions. And the colleagues that were from the Global South, that I had chats and dinners and etc. during the lead author meetings, the biggest challenge is time. So how do you balance your time in the IPCC? And especially if you're a lecturer, a professor at the university, and you need to teach. And that's really difficult to balance the teaching and your time in the IPCC and your time to write proposals to get funding to be able to fund PhD students and projects. So that was the big challenge, time. And because if you spend time in the IPCC, then it means that you probably spend less time writing proposals and less funding. And for example, in Africa, many universities are not research institutions. They are mostly teaching type of universities. And there are less people that can publish papers and build a track record to be able to apply for the IPCC. So this is also one of the challenges, having publications to prove that you are a good researcher. Yeah, I think yeah, those are basic the challenges from the colleagues in Africa, for example.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I think now we will switch to the second part of our discussion, which is how to engage beyond scientific projects and closer to, and how to make the link between science and society. And I want to go to Odin now. So Odin, you mentioned you were engaged in many networks, but you did say you were engaged since you got a permanent position. And I wanted to know how, like, is this really what triggered you to engage more, that you had secured a position, or were you engaged before as a scientist networks that would engage with society more generally.
Yes, thank you for the question. And it's a really good one. So I will give one element about me, and then maybe one or two examples about colleagues now that I know are in the network with who I work and that I've been engaging sometime very much before they get a permanent position. So yeah, I guess at the time for me, I had some interest in engaging or in doing more than participating in doing research that could be going in the good direction. Also, maybe in part because my research was maybe less aligned with direct ecological question, being working more on long-term earth science issues. But I guess one of the main barriers that stopped me at the time was that I did my PhD in Germany. I was not speaking German. I learned, of course, a little bit German while I was there, but between the PhD, learning German, a lot of engaged NGOs or groups were actually functioning in German because they needed to write text in German for the public or to talk to the public in German, etc. And so, although I did a few tries, this was a big stop. And then when I went to Zurich, this was again a bit particular, and I didn't stay long enough to do that. So I guess it was a mixture of both, yes, as Izidine said, a trade-off of time and of the pressure when you are a non-permanent researcher, but also the fact that I was in a foreign country where, because of the language barrier, it was more difficult to engage into more politically engaged or public debate activities. So this was some issues, but to give some opposite examples, I know several people now that have been engaging during their PhD or their postdoctoral research while being in France. Not all of them are French, but they all do speak French, and so they have been able to contribute to various forms of engagement, whether it is writing text or petition, open letters in the public media, participating into direct action, etc. And interestingly, what is very nice in this type of activities is that these are never individual actions. We are often groups of 10, 20, sometimes more people doing different parts of the job, and collectively preparing this text, this position, this action, sometimes working with other NGOs. And because of that, even if you have only some spare time and you cannot involve fully into it, people could put some energy into it, could participate, could help to write text, bring their expertise, sometimes just come for the action on the day and then go back to their PhD or their postdoc, etc. And I'm only talking about actions that we sign or that we indicate that we were scientists, right? So I'm not talking about NGOs that are not specifically for scientists. And I want to say that I'm very impressed by these people because still, of course, it takes some time and there are big questions. Maybe we will come back to that on whether or not it will affect your career negatively. But I'm happy to see that I know several of these people that got in the last years or this year permanent position, whereas it could be known very easily on a Google search. You could see that they had been given interviews, they had been in the media, they had been saying that they were participating in this type of protest or signing this text that were quite critical or radical, and that some other scientists could be a bit surprised or a bit critical about it. So it's not necessarily something blocking you, but of course it takes time. So there are questions on how to do it, with who to do it, where to find a collective to get strength to do it collectively, not to be completely consumed. And also to have the feeling that when we are 50 working on something, you don't need to put so much energy, and at the end there is something really coming out, going in the media, being taken up by the media sometime, affecting people in different ways, etc. Yeah. I can give more example later. Yeah.
There is flexibility to engage one day a week or one day a month or maybe even just one day a year in different collectives. And I think it's a really good point that you mentioned that some of your colleagues did get a permanent position even though they were known to be engaged in
a sense, engaged in some activism in a sense of course,
because
activism,
we are always worried that activism will impact negatively or the image that we have as scientists, and of course this is very debated, but these are examples that it did not.
Of course, I'm sure we could also find some example where sometimes it has caused troubles in the team, or I mean, maybe some of you know Christophe Cassou, that is a lead IPCC author for Working Group 1. And he has been engaged a lot, so we have been working with him on different issues or on different public debates in France, because he has been taken a lot position. And he has received quite some critics from outside the academic field. Of course, there have been some death threats or some harassment on social media. But there have also been some colleagues of him at Météo France or CNRM or in other places saying like, well, no, like Christophe now is not a scientist anymore, he's an activist. Whereas, of course, this like what's the basis of this statement? You can engage in activist activity, you can still publish and do some outreach about perfectly correct science. So yeah, this will be discussed more later.
Would you say that in a way engaging in extra academic activities as a scientist also gave you energy, like also gave you purpose as a scientist? Like, did it feedback positively into your science or for colleagues of yours?
For this, I'm not sure, because, for example, on my side, I have reoriented my research. It's still an ongoing process. It's not something that happened in a few months, but I still prefer to reduce and maybe in some years stop my activities of research in geomorphology to align more on other science topic. But this is still doing research, and I'm very eager to have the flexibility, the institutional opportunity to shift topic, to start.
So this is a possibility for you within your institution.
Yes, but I'm very well aware that depending on the position, your institution, even in France, depending on your status, it may be much more complicated. In CNRS in France, it's quite doable. I would not say it's super easy, but it's really doable. And there are ways to be evaluated by other disciplines, etc. But what is clear is that I guess, and I have sent in the small reference that I've put on the pad before, like this day, there is a number of arguments that could say that that maybe as a scientist, if we only do research and publish, and maybe this could be a debate for later, this may not be enough to trigger collective political actions, and so there is a need to go beyond that. IPCC is an example of that, because it's making the observation that we need to prepare the science and treat it in a way that can be more understandable by the public, by the politicians, etc. To make statements that are not only about the fundamental science, but about its implication for society. And of course, this become non-neutral, this become political in a sense. But there are other ways also to bring the science, the evidence. And of course, I want to say I've never been part of writing anything in IPCC, but I've read many times and going back to the technical summary of the 3 groups and using them for outreach, for publication in the media, so not academic publication, but for bringing evidence, etc. And the work of IPBES also, so the equivalent of the IPCC, but for biodiversity and ecosystem, is super important into bringing scientific evidence that that we have ecological crisis, catastrophes, sometimes I say, and that we need change that are not only technical. We really need to have radical change, in my opinion. So we need to bring the science and put it in different arena. So with activists, in the public, in the media, sometimes by also targeting adversary. I mean, we have often been into campaign of against private jet or against bank that were heavily subsidizing the fossil fuel industry to really show and make clear in the public that some people are not on the good side of the climate crisis or ecological crisis, and so we need to make them change their trajectory.
Yeah, thanks, Odin. So regarding bringing the science in the policymaking arena, I want to turn to Sarah, and maybe you can tell us a bit about your experience as a science policy fellow for the EGU, and what did it entail, and how did you find you had an impact as a scientist, or and how did you make the choice to switch from academia to this side, and did you feel like that it was an effective way of engaging and of bringing the science into policymaking?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, as Odin was saying, there's like many different ways that you can get involved. going, I would say, beyond the typical research and development academic career, and IPCC is one of them, advocacy and the examples that Odin was saying are another. I have experience of doing something a bit more in between, where it's like developing things like policy briefs or having meetings with policymakers for science for policy discussions. And so I put in the chat and on the Padlet a couple of links. There's a lot of interesting resources about different ways you can get involved on the European Geosciences Union website. It's not just for EU people. It's more open than that. But yeah, there will be various like task groups you might be able to join where you can be advisors for particular calls. For example, if the European Commission are thinking of developing a new law on a particular climate topic, they will do these open consultations, and you can provide information and input on these on the proposed legislation. And so you can provide things like scientific evidence on why this may be useful, good, not, and so it's not exactly activism. It's really just providing the science for a policy perspective. And
it's a way
yes,
of working within the institutions, I guess.
You can be you can be outside of them. So sometimes there are also placements. So I know that the UK does this. For example, you can have seconded positions within like the civil service department, where you can work for a year in a department related to air quality, for example, as a scientific advisor. And so you are there with bringing your expertise from your research to help with the policy analysts or policy developers within government. But some of the other examples can be you can just do this from your own research position, but take part in these external consultations as well. Yeah, and some of them are not very time consuming, and some of them are much more time consuming. But there's many different options. So you can actually sign up if you're interested in, like on the European Commission kind of level, you can sign up to various alerts when they ask for consultations, and so you can get that information sent to you in your inbox whenever you want to. Yeah, so there's many different ways you can get involved.
Thanks, Sarah. And maybe a quick question before switching to the third part. How was it for you to adjust from a PhD, like purely research, to science to policy, in terms of ways of working? Because this is not something we're taught when we do research.
I personally, I found it I really liked it because I'm not a policy person, but I'm on that interface. So I work with scientists to help them translate sometimes to policymakers, and sometimes I work with policymakers to help translate some of the jargon I used to back to the researchers. Like there's two different dialogues, two different jargon sets, and so trying to understand and break down those barriers I find there's a really interesting challenge. And yeah, I just think it's a really nice communication exercise as well. There was a scientific advisor for the UK, Marc, who always said science isn't finished until it's communicated. And again, it's maybe not everyone's role to communicate, but there is this, it's very difficult if you come from a non-scientific background to read an academic paper and understand what I should do and how I should make policy decisions based on that. So there needs to be this sort of in-between phase. And so IPCC is an example of that as well. So yeah, I really like the challenge of it. I find it very interesting and rewarding.
Being a translator of science to policy.
Yeah, I'm more on the science side now, but yeah, it's super interesting.
No, it's crucial. So I guess this is one example of how we can work outside of academia with a background in science. And Izidine, you also have an experience outside of academia, although you went back to academia. So we wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience in that you did 1 year, I think, in the Red Cross Climate Center. So can you tell us like what motivated you to work to have this experience, and then what's motivated you to come back to academia, so we can have both sides of the story?
Well, I was working in academia is mostly doing research, and as Sarah was explained, the research is not done until science is not done until you communicate. So the Red Cross was mostly communicating the findings from climate science to applying. In this case, was on early warning. How could we use science to be able to inform people to prepare for a cyclone that is coming? So my job was mainly looking at the weather forecast, looking at the papers, the stage of weather forecast, to be able to come up with ideas and plans to inform these people, and to also come up with early actions. So what do people can do if they know that a tropical cyclone is coming, and what are the areas that is going to be impacted, and etc. So mostly translating the science into action.
So this was really going one step beyond your, like starting from your science and then going one step beyond. Okay, what can we do once we have that climate information?
Yes, because research is really important, but if you are a policymaker, you cannot read a paper and you do understand. So you need people that are going to translate, saying this paper means this, and once you accumulate all this body of knowledge, this is what you can do. So basically,
yeah. And I guess you had, so then you had to interact with actors that were not from your field, or I guess. So how was that? How was that easy? Was this difficult?
That is not easy, because I was coming from science and I didn't know how to communicate the science findings. And one of the problems was the language. Even if you speak, even if you both speak English, if you are speaking science and the other person is speaking your policy, so your language is not the same. So you need to learn how to communicate your findings. One of the biggest problem is, how do you explain uncertainty, for example, to say that, for example, how do you explain the probabilities of that in 3 days might rain or might not rain, because the person wants to know if it's going to rain or not. You cannot say it's going to rain, there's a 50% chance that it's going to rain or not. So there's these subtleties of language.
And did you work with experts? Did you work with communication experts on these topics?
No, in this case, no. It was a trial and error, and trial and was mostly learning in the job.
Yeah. So what then motivated you to come back to your academic career?
Well, for many reasons, and I was finding it a bit difficult to interact with actors, because of the how to interpret the science into action. So I thought, maybe this is not for me. I should go back to academia, go back to my my ocean where I can swim properly, and and being in a place that I don't know how to swim, basically, was most of that. So I tried when I was in academia. I said, no, I want to go out and experience the world outside academia. I went there and I tried, and I came back.
And so now that you're back, and now that you have a permanent position, are you? Do you think you will? I mean, now you're again a lead author in the IPCC special reports on climate change and cities. So I guess this is also one step going towards climate information, giving climate information. So do you think will you do more of that from that secured position where you can swim comfortably?
Yes, I guess having a permanent position also gives you these opportunities to do a lot of things. You don't have to worry about your next year. What are you going to do next year? So this is a great. I'm lucky to have a permanent position at the Dutch Royal Meteorological Institute, and from the IPCC, they also support my participation in the IPCC. But it doesn't mean your work will reduce. You still have to meet your deadlines. So this is kind of.
And this is another challenge, yeah.
Yes. So this is a personal commitment that I want to contribute to society, but then I have to put my own time, because the deadlines will not. The work deadlines will.
Even as a permanent researcher, you still face the challenge of time, and you still need institutional support. In fact, to be able to participate.
Yeah. Because as a researcher, you have your commitments, your deadlines. You still have to meet them, even if you are participating in the IPCC. So the time. Yeah.
So we're coming close to the end of this panel discussion. So before we go to concluding remarks, maybe if some of you have a thought about, so we've mentioned different ways to engage as scientists. Pauline,
Yeah, there's a question from the Padlet, maybe. Yeah, how much experience is needed to support political decision making as a scientist? Are PhDs or postdocs, yeah, positions necessary? Maybe that's for Sarah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends on the activity that you're wanting to be involved with, and the topic that you're being involved with. If you are someone who has worked in industry, for example, you may not have like a PhD or postdoc level, but if you're working something relevant, it still might be useful to have engagement and to take part in some of these processes. So I don't know. I don't think it's like a binary yes/no answer. It really is context dependent. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to add to this or say anything different to what I just said.
I think, yeah, I can say something about that. It's really difficult as a scientist to provide support for decision making unless you are working with policymakers directly. If you are just a researcher at the university doing your research, it's really difficult. So you really need to work, unless you have a project together with a policymaker, then that is easier to make a change.
Thank you. Pauline, you have another question from the Padlet?
It's yeah, I actually it's from me, but I didn't write it down yet. But maybe you can answer it within the take-home messages in a minute. But why did you want to join IPCC as a lead author? So that's a question mostly for Izidine, Sarah, and Helene. Was it for joining big review process, for the networking, for feeling engaged, and did it help your career or not because of the time it required, but maybe it actually gave you visibility? So yeah, it was a little bit my question.
Okay, so then maybe we can switch to a take-home message, and you can answer maybe that question within it. So yeah, just some, if you have some concluding remarks, and especially targeted to early career scientists engaged in the climate science community. So I don't know, let's start with Izidine.
Yeah, so I can quickly say why I decided to join the IPCC. I think it's mostly because curiosity. I wanted to be together with people from different cultures, different type of knowledge, and was a great opportunity for me to learn as well. I think that's the biggest advantage. You learn a lot, and also to contribute to one of the most policy relevant assessments. I think that was my main goal at the IPCC. And maybe my take-home message is just, yeah, stay curious and have fun. I think that's most important. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Izidine. So Helene, do you want to give a few words, concluding remarks? We cannot, I think you're muted.
IPCC, I got involved because I wanted to do something which was making the science applicable to the policymakers and have that opportunity to communicate that. It probably did help my career, but I didn't do it for that. And it's definitely changed my perspective in many ways. And if I was an early careers person, I was interested in that. Yeah, it's just yeah, get involved in the ways we've suggested, if not as an author, but as a reviewer, writing papers, and so on. And just things just evolve, and life always takes you in a direction you don't expect.
Thank you. Odin?
Yes. So I will not answer about the IPCC, but just saying that, yeah, I think we, as a scientist, and especially as scientists engaged in climate science or environmental science, it's quite clear that we, I mean, I guess that many can feel a sense of despair or disappointment, because we see that there is a strong decoupling between scientific evidence, let's say, that is calling for emergency actions, and the political world or the economic world. And of course, to some extent, this is normal, because I guess we are also many to imagine that it's not only to the scientists to decide and etc. But from this perspective, it makes the point that we may be feeling better and find our job more meaningful by not only investing all our time into advancing our career and publishing papers, etc., but also by trying to understand what are the barriers to changes, what can be political directions that could help in avoiding, to some extent, some of the climate change consequences for the one that can be avoided. And yeah, so I think I want to say that this type of engagement, it can be, of course, more difficult to choose when there are strong pressure on having a permanent position, but I would strongly encourage everyone to dedicate some time to thinking to these questions. There is a lot of scientific literature available on what works or does not work, what are the different sources of the problems, what are political adversaries, what are issues that needs to be overcome, and then to, in a sense, to engage more as a citizen also with our political duties, I could say, in democracy. And as scientists, we are in a privileged position because we are very close to some of the knowledge, some of the evidence. Of course, we need to make an effort also to read outside our discipline, because the problems is not only related to climate. I think that was a key point I wanted to insist on. There is also biodiversity collapse, there are also resource issues, inequality issues. So, but we can talk with our peers, because academia is also a community that is going beyond disciplines, and we can work collectively and engage collectively. So yeah, I encourage people to form groups, not to be isolated, not to be alone, not to feel powerless. And then when you can join a group, and this can be IPCC, this can be within your lab, this can be NGOs, or this can be groups of engaged scientists. I think it was cited the Union of Concerned Scientists. Then there are opportunities to work on that. And I leave one more reference for people that want to start also to think to the main issue we need to address. That's it for me. Thank you again for organizing these places and these institutional places where we can discuss that also, and where we can reflect on that, not to be only catched on the emergency next publication, let's say.
Yeah, thank you, Odin. That's really empowering. And I think you had references to share. I mean, yeah, you just shared one, and if you have others, please put them in the chat. And we can finish with Sarah.
Thank you. So just very quickly on why I joined the IPCC. So I was actually one of the few people that actually got paid to work for the IPCC. So everyone does this as a voluntary role, apart from the technical support unit members, because we're full-time or part-time staff that are here to help scope the process. I still didn't avoid the short-term contract issue. I think I changed contracts 4 times in 6 years with the IPCC. Hopefully it's not as bad in AR7 compared to AR6. But no, it was very stressful, very time-consuming part of my life, but I loved it overall, and I learned so much, and I got to know so many amazing people from all over the world. So that is something that I really truly cherish. I still have friends for now from different countries. It's just hard trying to see them now. But no, I really enjoyed my experience, and I definitely wouldn't have got the job I have now, which is a permanent contract, if I hadn't have done the IPCC. So it was a good stepping stone in that respect. The final thing I would say is we've discussed many different activities, many different options and different ways to engage outside of the pure traditional academia or getting involved with things. Please don't feel that you have to do all of these things. I hope that the panelists here, we've shown you interesting examples of what you can be involved with. Maybe one thing will be of more interest you think than the others. Try that first. Please don't think you have to do any of them or you have to do lots of them. Just if you think it sounds nice, then we encourage you to try it. But yeah, doing academia in its own right is also a big job. So please don't feel like you have to really overextend yourself as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, it can be overwhelming to hear all these different experiences and how far you went. But as you said, I think even small engagement in community projects is already big, especially when we have non-permanent contracts. So thank you to all of the panelists. We are exactly on time. We touched on many aspects, but also many things that could have been discussed. I guess it will be for another panel discussion, hopefully in the future. And as Odin said, I think it's really important to have the space to discuss how scientists can be engaged in society and how they can have an impact. And we hope this was a little bit useful to the early careers listening to us. And I guess we will turn back to the IPO for for the next slot. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Yona, for moderating, and everyone for attending. Thanks so much, and to our 4 panelists. It was awesome, and I think if the audience still have questions for them, for us, you can come to us, and I'm sure we would love to answer or to help you. And otherwise, yeah, I give it back to Beth and Douglas for the regional closing and opening remarks of the America's Hub.